My name is Juliet, I'm 25 years old. Today I'm going to talk about the day that your sister doesn't want you there, said my mom, after I paid for her whole wedding. It's a pleasure to have you here. Stay tuned until the end, and tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story has gone. And click on like, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss the next stories here on the channel. I was 25 when I learned the people you bleed for can be the first to turn their backs on you. The lesson didn't come softly. It came like a slap, cold and deliberate. It happened just days before my sister Caroline's wedding. A wedding I had quietly helped pay for. From the outside, we looked like the picture-perfect family. My sister, the beautiful bride-to-be, our mother, elegant and proud, and me, Juliet, the dependable one, the responsible daughter, the quiet achiever who always said yes. I never questioned the way things were. Not really. Not until the day my mother sat me down at the kitchen table and said, without a hint of emotion, "Your sister doesn't want you there." It didn't register at first. I blinked. What do you mean? There where? She looked down at her tea. At the wedding. Caroline doesn't want you there. She says it's her special day, and she wants to feel comfortable. It was like she was reading from a script. No apology. No explanation. Just that. My stomach flipped. I had just finished transferring the last $1,200 to the florist the day before. Over the last 8 months, I had covered the venue deposit, the dress alterations, the DJ, and even the custom cake she wanted. Caroline never once said thank you. And now she didn't want me there. But I paid for it. I whispered, more to myself than to her. Mom didn't even blink. It's not about money, Juliet. It's about keeping things peaceful. You know how sensitive Caroline can be. That phrase, "You know how sensitive Caroline can be," had been used my entire life to excuse everything from her tantrums to her passive-aggressive jabs. Caroline was the sun in our household, and I was the shade that made her look brighter. I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened, and I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Did she say why? Did I do something? My mother sighed. Don't make this about you. It's her wedding. Let her have it the way she wants. I felt like I had stepped into someone else's life, like a stranger looking in through a window. The betrayal didn't scream. It was quiet, matter-of-fact, polite even. But it cut so much deeper that way. That night, I sat on my bed staring at the receipt emails still open on my laptop. 8 months of my life. All the hours I worked overtime. The trips I didn't take. The weekends I skipped outings with friends. And for what? So my sister could play princess while erasing me from the narrative? I thought about confronting Caroline. I typed and deleted a dozen texts. I even drafted an email. But nothing felt right. Because deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. This wasn't about a misunderstanding. It was the culmination of something much bigger. Something I had been ignoring my whole life. I remembered birthdays where she got the big parties and I got store-bought cupcakes. The time she crashed my car and I took the blame. The college savings account that mysteriously disappeared the year she decided to go to a yoga retreat in Bali. I used to think that was just family. Now I knew better. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called in sick and stayed in bed. My phone buzzed with photos of Caroline's bridal shower. My mother stood beside her, beaming like she had raised a queen. My name wasn't mentioned. Not even a tag. I wasn't just uninvited. I was erased. And then came the message, from Caroline herself. Hey, just wanted to avoid drama. Hope you understand. We'll catch up after the honeymoon. I stared at it for a long time. Not a thank you. Not a sorry. Just that. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were old journals, birthday cards I had written and never sent, and a letter. One my dad had given me before he passed away when I was 15. Always know your worth, Juliet. Even when others don't see it. Especially then. I clutched it like it could anchor me. That night I cried. Not just for the wedding, or for Caroline, but for all the times I had let them make me feel like I was lucky just to be included. This wasn't about a wedding. It was about waking up. And now that I wasn't sure I could go back to sleep. 3 days after the wedding I didn't attend. I went back to the house I grew up in. Not because I wanted to, but because my mother called asking if I could help return some of the rented decor. You know where everything is, she said, like I was still the family assistant. The house was quiet when I arrived. She wasn't home. Probably at brunch with Caroline, rehashing the magical day that I was too disruptive to witness. I walked past the kitchen, past the framed photo of Caroline in her graduation gown. My own photo had disappeared years ago and never came back. The boxes for the rental company were in the dining room, neatly stacked. But I didn't go there first. Something pulled me upstairs. Maybe curiosity. Maybe anger. Maybe the hollow part inside me that still wanted some explanation. I stepped into my old bedroom. It hadn't been touched much. Just dusty or colder. My old bookshelf was still there, stuffed with teenage novels and forgotten journals. My desk still had the faded sticker I had stuck on the side when I was 13. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. I sat on the floor and opened the bottom drawer of the dresser, the one I used to hide things in. At the very back was a manila envelope. It was unmarked, unsealed, and heavier than I expected. I opened it and pulled out a small stack of papers, brittle and yellowing. The first was a birth certificate. Mine. Then another document, a letter. My father's handwriting. I knew it instantly. My chest tightened. If Juliet ever finds this, it's because she's old enough to know the truth. I read every line with shaking hands. The letter revealed something I had never imagined. Caroline and I didn't share the same father. My dad had raised her like his own when he married our mother, but Caroline wasn't his biological daughter. I was. And Mom had sworn him to secrecy. He wrote about how he had always tried to be fair, but how it hurt him that Mom clearly favored Caroline. He admitted that he didn't understand it fully himself, just that she seemed to cling to Caroline in a way that made him feel like Juliet was his and Caroline was hers. He ended the letter with, "I'm sorry if you ever felt less than. You never were." I sat on the floor for a long time. The pieces began to rearrange themselves in my mind. The favoritism. The constant undermining. The way my mother dismissed me like I was in the way. I had always believed it was something wrong with me. I was too quiet, too serious, too needy. But it wasn't me. It was her. It had always been her. When my mother came home, I was still sitting on the floor. She froze in the doorway. "You went through my things?" she asked, her voice clipped. "No," I said calmly. "My things. My drawer. My letter." Her eyes flicked to the envelope beside me, and for a moment, something almost like fear crossed her face. "You weren't supposed to find that. Why? Why keep it from me? Why treat me like I was always in the way?" She looked tired suddenly, like the weight of her choices had finally caught up to her. But she didn't apologize. Of course she didn't. "Because he loved you more," she said quietly. And I hated that. That sentence hit me like a punch. Simple. Brutal. Honest in the most twisted way. I left without saying another word. That night, I reread the letter. I cried again. But this time, it wasn't the same kind of pain. It was older. Deeper. But cleaner too. It wasn't grief anymore. It was clarity. And once you see the truth, you can't go back to pretending. What would you do if it were you? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe and activate the bell to receive all notifications so you don't miss the next story. After the truth settled into my bones like cold water, I knew one thing. I couldn't stay. Not in that house, not in that town, and not in that role they had carved out for me. The quiet, obedient daughter who gave and asked for nothing. So I left. I moved 2 hours away to a small town I had only passed through once before. I rented a modest one-bedroom apartment above a bookstore and took a job as a receptionist at a dental office. It was nothing glamorous, but it was mine. My space. My rules. My silence. For the first few weeks, I didn't speak much to anyone outside of work. I went to the grocery store, made dinner for one, and listened to old records I had found in a thrift shop. There was something soothing about the routine. I felt like I was patching something broken inside me. One small act at a time. Therapy came next. I found a local therapist named Dr. Ruth, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She didn't coddle me. She didn't rush me either. But every week, She handed me a metaphorical chisel to start chipping away at years of buried hurt. She asked me once, "What do you want that you've never allowed yourself to want?" I didn't have an answer then. I do now. Peace. And the audacity to protect it. 3 months passed. I stopped checking my phone every morning for messages that never came. I stopped visiting my sister's social media profiles like some kind of emotional masochist. Instead, I started building something different. Something for me. I enrolled in a night course on creative writing at the community college. I had always loved words but never believed I had anything worth saying. That changed when I wrote a short piece about betrayal and read it aloud to the class. The room went silent. One woman teared up. Afterward, the professor pulled me aside and said, "You're writing from a place people are scared to admit they live in. Keep going." And I did. One day, out of nowhere, a message came through from Caroline. "Hey, just wondering if we could talk. I feel like things got really tense." Tense. That's the word she chose for exile. I didn't respond. 2 days later, she messaged again. "I'm pregnant. I'd really like my sister around." There it was. The hook. The emotional bait. And yet, all I felt was stillness. I showed the message to Dr. Ruth. She looked at me and said, "You get to decide if biology is enough. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's not." I waited a week. Then I sent back a simple reply. "I'm glad you're well. I wish you peace. I'm not in a place to reconnect." No anger. No confrontation. Just a boundary. It felt like putting a key in a lock and turning it closed from the inside. Of course, my mother called next. Her voice was sharp. "You're being dramatic. She's having a baby. You're her sister." "I was never treated like a sister," I said calmly. "And I don't owe anyone access to my life just because they share my blood." She hung up. I expected to feel guilt. I didn't. I felt like I had finally exhaled after holding my breath for 25 years. A week later, I was invited to read one of my essays at a local event. The theme was resilience. I read a piece called "The Chair at the Table That Was Never Mine." It was raw, honest. I didn't use names, but everyone knew the feeling I was describing. After the reading, a woman in her 50s came up to me in tears. That was me. That's still me. We sat and talked for an hour. In her eyes, I saw something I had never seen in my family. Recognition. That night, I walked home under a quiet sky. The stars didn't feel so far anymore. I wasn't healed, but I was healing. And that mattered. It was a Saturday morning, quiet like most of them. I had just poured my coffee and opened a book when someone knocked on my apartment door. Not a knock and wait, but a knocking keep knocking kind of knock. My heart skipped. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and there she was. Caroline. Heavily pregnant, her makeup slightly smudged, her eyes puffy like she hadn't slept. "Juliet," she said as if we'd just talked yesterday. "Can I come in?" I stood frozen. She stepped forward like she was going to walk right past me. I held the door frame. "What are you doing here?" I asked. My voice came out calm, but my pulse was loud in my ears. "I needed to talk to you. In person. Please." I stepped aside, more out of reflex than permission. She walked in like she belonged. Looked around like she was taking inventory of what my new life looked like. "It's small," she commented. "But cute." I didn't respond. I waited. She sat down without asking and sighed. "Look, I know things got bad. But I miss you. And I don't want us to go through life not speaking." "Caroline," I said, "you uninvited me from your wedding. After I paid for most of it. And then said you hoped I'd understand." She winced. "It wasn't my idea. Mom said you were making things tense. And I just wanted peace that day." I stared at her. "So you erased me for peace?" She looked at her hands. "It was a mistake." "Yeah," I said. "It was." Silence fell. "I'm having a daughter," she said suddenly. "And I've been thinking a lot about family. About how we grew up. And I want her to have an aunt. A real one. Someone who's strong and kind. Like you." I felt the words hit and scatter across my skin. Not because they were sweet, but because they were strategic. Caroline always knew how to make a pitch. She reached into her purse and pulled out a tiny pink onesie. I bought this for you. For her. So you could have something. I don't know. Symbolic, I guess. She placed it on the coffee table between us. Like it was an offering. I looked at it. And then I looked at her. I'm not your fixer, Caroline. I'm not your backup when mom's being impossible, or when you feel lonely. I'm not your extra pair of hands. I was your sister for 25 years, and you made sure I knew I didn't matter. She looked like she might cry, but I wasn't moved this time. Not anymore. I'm not angry, I added. I don't have room for this kind of pain again. So that's it, she asked. You're just done. I took a breath. I'm healing. And this pulls me backward. She stood up slowly, nodding. Okay. I get it. I really do. At the door, she paused. If I ever deserve a second chance, will you let me try? I didn't answer. I watched her walk down the hallway and disappear into the stairwell. The onesie stayed on the table for hours. I stared at it. I thought about it. Then I folded it, placed it in a drawer, and closed it. Not to forget, but to remember the strength it took to say no. 2 weeks after Caroline's visit, I ran into someone I hadn't seen since high school. Mia Turner. We were in the same AP English class. I remembered her as the girl with thick glasses and a quiet laugh who used to doodle in her notebook during lectures. Back then, we weren't exactly friends, just classmates with a mutual respect for each other's silence. Now we bumped into each other at the farmer's market. I was examining peaches. She was holding a toddler on her hip. Juliet, she said, squinting. Oh my God. It's really you. I turned, surprised. Mia. She laughed. You look exactly the same. Still calm and collected. We caught up quickly. She lived in the same town, worked as a graphic designer from home, was divorced and raising her son, Caleb, on her own. We ended up walking around together, and she invited me for coffee later that week. What started as a polite reconnection turned into something rare, a safe space. Over the next few months, we became close. There was no performance with Mia. I didn't have to explain every silence, every moment of pause. She never asked too many questions, but she always made space for answers. I told her slowly about Caroline, about the wedding, about the letter from my dad, about everything I had kept buried. She didn't offer platitudes. She just listened. Sometimes that's everything. One night, I stayed over at her place after a storm knocked out my power. We sat on her couch with hot tea while Caleb slept in the other room. She looked at me and said, You know, you're the only person in my life right now who just shows up without wanting something. I smiled. You are too. It was the first time in a long time I felt like I belonged somewhere. Not because I was useful. Not because I was convenient. Just because I was me. Weeks passed. One evening, she invited me to Caleb's preschool event. The kids were supposed to bring a guest to share a drawing with. Are you sure? I asked. Yeah, she said. He asked if you could come. He calls you Juliet. That night, as Caleb proudly showed me his drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands, him, Mia, and me, I felt something shift. A weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying lifted. Later that night, Mia hugged me tight and said, I hope you know your family now. Not the kind that disappears. The kind that chooses you. I went home and cried. Not because I was sad. Because for the first time, someone chose me without asking for anything in return. Not my money. Not my silence. Not my role in their spotlight. Just me. I started to dream differently after that. About the kind of home I wanted to build. Even if it was just for myself. A home with peace and intention. A life full of chosen people, not inherited pain. That same week, I walked past a small rental house with a sign out front. Available. Quiet neighborhood. Garden space. I called the number. The landlord met me the next day. The place was old, a little rundown, but it had a small porch and wildflowers blooming out front. I could see myself writing there, cooking there, living there. 2 days later, I signed the lease. And for the first time, when I wrote my new address on a piece of mail, I felt like I was writing the beginning of something that belonged to me. The new house smelled like old wood and quiet. I had been living there for just over a month when the knock came. I recognized it immediately, short, firm, too familiar. It wasn't Mia. It wasn't the mailman. I opened the door. My mother stood there. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair had more gray than before. Her lipstick was faded. For the first time in my life, she didn't look in control. She looked tired. "I need to talk to you," she said. I didn't move. She sighed. "Please, Juliet. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious." I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of my couch like she didn't trust it to hold her weight. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Caroline had the baby," she began. "A girl. Her name is Ella." I stayed silent. "She's struggling, Juliet. Really struggling. Postpartum depression, money problems. Her boyfriend left. She's barely coping." Still, I didn't speak. I waited for the part that would justify the visit. "She needs help. And I can't do it alone. She asked for you." I looked at her. "She asked for me, or you did?" She blinked. "Does it matter?" I almost laughed. "Yes," I said. "It matters. Because for years, all I ever wanted was to be wanted. Not needed. Not tolerated. Wanted." She swallowed hard. "You're the strong one, Juliet. You always have been." "No," I corrected. "I've been the used one. The quiet one. The ignored one. That's not strength. That's survival." She started crying. Real tears. It shook me, because I had never seen her cry without bitterness attached. "I made mistakes," she said. "I don't know how to fix them." I believed her. But I also knew something else. "Some things you don't fix," I said. "You live with them. And you try to do better with what's left." She nodded. "I'm sorry, Juliet." It was the first time I'd heard her say it. And yet, it didn't change what I needed to do. I hope Caroline gets the help she needs. But I'm not the help anymore. I've spent my whole life being what everyone else needed. I finally know what I need, and I'm choosing that. She stood up slowly. "I understand," she said. I walked her to the door. "Tell her I wish her peace," I said. "But I won't give up mine for hers." She nodded again. Then she left. And I closed the door. Not in anger. In protection. That night, I sat on my porch, the sky wide and open above me. I held a cup of tea and listened to the wind in the trees. I thought about my father. About Mia and Caleb. About the home I was building, one decision at a time. I wasn't the same Juliet who begged for scraps of love. I was someone else now. Not bitter. Not broken. Free. If you like stories like these, click like, subscribe, activate the bell and send it to someone you think will also like it.